Both the Gaiwan and clay teapot are popular choices when it comes to preparing oolong tea, but which one is better? In this video, we're going to be preparing Japanese oolong tea, both in the teapot and in the Gaiwan, to see which one works best. I'll also explain my personal strategy when it comes to testing out a new tea. Let's get started. Okay, so what I have here is the Miyazaki Sabo oolong. This is a Japanese oolong coming from Miyazaki in southern Japan. And we're just going to compare it using two different brewing methods that are very popular for oolong tea. But before we do that, let's take a quick look at the leaves. And you may notice some differences right away between other oolongs you may have had in the past. These are much looser, so they don't have that kind of typical tightly rolled oolong shape that you might get from a Taiwanese oolong, which goes through a specific rolling method to get those kind of tight ball-shaped leaves. This is much more loosely packed, which is kind of something that you'll see in other Japanese oolong teas. Japanese oolong teas are very rare as a whole, so most of the tea, almost all of the tea produced in Japan is green teas. But after traveling around Japan for a few years, we've met with dozens of farmers, and we've found a few that are actually producing oolong teas, black teas, as well as post-fermented teas. So that's very interesting. So, that's one of the benefits of doing what we do is we get to kind of discover some of these rare teas that you wouldn't normally find around Japan, where most of the tea is green tea. So this was a nice discovery for us from the farmer Miyazaki Sabo. And we've been trying this tea out along with some other oolong teas, and this is the one that we've selected as being our favorite. This was kind of the first oolong tea to match up to our standards, so we're happy to have it. And what we notice is that compared to other oolongs we've had in the past, this one is very light and flowery, so that's something to make a note of as well. But let's get right into the tasting. For this, I'm going to be trying two different methods. The first is going to be using this clay teapot that I've been using for a lot of the Chinese teas, and the second is a Gaiwan. This is a very small Gaiwan. So basically, these are two different methods of tea brewing. Obviously, you know the teapot, but you might not be familiar with the Gaiwan. This is basically as simple as it gets in terms of preparing loose leaf tea. You basically just put the leaves in here, and then instead of having a built-in filter like you would have with a Kyusu teapot or a clay teapot, you basically use this as your filter. So this is something you can do, and it actually works much better with larger leaf teas. And the reason we don't really do it is because mostly I'm preparing Japanese green teas, which have smaller leaves. And when you're preparing smaller leaves in the Gaiwan, you really have to kind of set a very narrow aperture on the Gaiwan. Otherwise, the leaves are going to go into your cup. But let's go ahead and get right into it. So the obvious thing here is that we're going to be using a much heavier leaf to water ratio with the Gaiwan. And I'm going to compensate for that by using a very small brewing time, very short brewing time. I'm talking like 5 to 10 seconds. So one brewing method that I've been liking is using 5 seconds for the first brewing, just to kind of strip out those outer aromatics and kind of see what you get, and then add 5 seconds each time. So 10 seconds for the second brewing, 15 seconds for the third brewing, and so on. For this teapot, I actually should probably start now because it's going to be a long brewing. I'm going to be using a much lower leaf to water ratio, so more water, same amount of leaves, and I'm going to be doing a much longer brewing time. I'm going to be doing 3 minutes. That's usually how I've been able to get some of the best results. So I filled the teapot up with water. Now the timer's set for 3 minutes. And while I'm waiting for that, I'm actually going to start preparing this Gaiwan here. So just the tiniest amount of water there. And quickly so this is really going to get you just a very small quantity of tea, but it should be super concentrated. And this is something I like when I'm really starting to get to know a tea, because you can really see all different layers of it, because you're kind of infusing it 5 seconds at a time, or 5, 10, 15 seconds at a time. So you're really kind of noticing all different stages, whereas with this tea, you're really kind of getting it all at once, which can be good to get a kind of a bold, rich flavor. But if you're kind of trying to study a tea, I think it's sometimes helpful to do these really short infusions. So you can see the leaves are really barely opened up at all. They haven't had much time to brew. The flavor coming off of the leaves, the aroma is like, it's so nice. It's like lilac, it's hyacinth, it's coconut milk. Kind of a very creamy, flowery. Oh, what is that? That's like something that you would get almost from like a bar of soap or something. It's very aromatic, very perfumey. Now I'm actually getting like strawberry, kind of like very sweet strawberry, almost like strawberry candy or something. That's like some of the better smelling tea leaves I've ever experienced, actually. Now, just to make this tasting work, I'm actually going to reinfuse the leaves while we're waiting, and I'll show you why in a second. And now let's do another 15 seconds, and then we'll pour out the teapot. Okay, so now it might be clear why I did 3 brewings in a row versus 1 brewing. And the reason is because, I'm comparing, basically I'm combining 3, 4 infusions into 1 teapot here, whereas this, you're kind of experiencing the tea in different stages. So I think it's important to kind of taste all 4 of these at once, if that makes sense, because I'm kind of seeing how the tea evolves from the first to the second to the third, versus if you were kind of to infuse the leaves all at once. Because the one thing I will say about the teapot, it gets you a nice big cup of tea, it gets you plenty of flavor. The one downside is that you're kind of experiencing it all at once. So you're going to get less infusions when you do it this way. Whereas if you brew with the Gaiwan, you can definitely easily get 8 super flavorful tea infusions. So like I said before, it's a good way to kind of experience a tea, discover a tea, because you're getting each individual layer of it at different times, versus here you're kind of getting it all at once, if that makes sense. So let's go ahead and have a tasting. First, the teapot. Oh yeah, super flowery, a little bit of astringency, a little bit of kind of like this soapy aromatic quality. It's very clean, it's like, it's perfumey, very nice. First brewing of the Gaiwan. Clearly just getting the aromatics here. It's just very light, very flowery, very perfumey, but not a whole lot of body to it. Second. This one I like a lot more. Much richer, much creamier, kind of like this coconut milk cream mixed with the lilac. Very nice. Then here, it's getting a little bit more sour. It's getting a little bit more challenging to the palate. There's much more going on. Overall, I like this one and this one more than the first one. So actually, some people would actually throw this brewing away and not even drink it. That's more of a complicated topic we can maybe get into another time. But basically, you're not really getting a whole lot of the tea when you just do that rapid 5-second infusion, because it's just kind of like that outer aromatic layer. So there's not a ton going on in this one. It's actually kind of nice. It's very light, very perfumey, but there's not a whole lot of character to the tea, whereas these 2 brewings here, there's much more. Yeah, I really like, there's a little bit of astringency with this tea, but it's very manageable, and it actually enhances the experience because it kind of rounds out the finish a little bit, kind of makes it more of a longer finish, which is nice. It's almost like a sourness. Go ahead, back to the teapot again. Yeah, this is really interesting. So, like I've said before, with this one, you're getting kind of 3, maybe even 4 brewings in one. So you're getting all the tea at once, and it kind of clashes with one another. So if you've experienced the tea many times before and you're just trying to get a nice strong cup of tea, you can go for this method. But I would recommend kind of shorter brewings spread out over longer time if you're just starting to get to know a tea, or you're doing a tasting like this. Because now, I see this here contains all the flavors of these brewings, but all at once. So it's very difficult to decipher like which flavor note is coming first, which one is coming next. It's a little bit harder to get an accurate assessment of the tea, but it is very enjoyable. So it's a very good tasting cup of tea. But when it comes to doing a tasting, I think it's much more effective to do this brewing method. Definitely takes longer, definitely requires more patience, but it's worth it if you really want an accurate assessment of a tea and you really want to look at it from all angles. So this is a method. Don't feel like you're missing out by doing this method versus the teapot, because you're going to get the same amount of tea. It's just going to be spread out over a longer time. So if you have the patience, if you have the time, definitely a recommended way to enjoy this tea. So thanks so much for joining us on this tasting of the Miyazaki Sabo, a very rare Japanese oolong tea that is really incredible. So however you decide that you want to prepare it, whether it's with the teapot or the Gaiwan, we'd be happy to share this tea with you. You can find it on our website, neoteas.com. We would really appreciate it if you could support us by ordering some tea and letting us know what you think. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you have any questions about oolong or tea in general, please feel free to leave those in the comments below. But until then, we'll see you next time.